Hello, everyone. This is April 26th, and this is the Object Storage Working Group meeting. And yeah, let's get started with the agenda items. Matthias, you have the first one.
Yeah, this is just a heads up that the documentation rework is live. Yeah, I'm just like, it was a long time in the making and actually contains less detail than I had initially intended to cover. Yeah, like have a look, like tell me if you think this is a good introduction into the main concepts, because I think maybe yeah, like this high level view hopefully is going to be useful to get into it. Whether it's enough for let's say there's new people joining this effort and they need to get productive, whether it's enough or not for this, I'm not sure, but that's something we can decide on in a separate step. So which relates to my second point there, which is we do have guidelines as well, which I did not update, for how to actually add a new upload. I see Jacob also left a comment there that we already have an issue to improve that. Yeah, because I'm thinking this could be a good opportunity to look at these kind of guardrails we might want to put in place, which could just be a call out if there's anything we want contributors not to do anymore. That could be a simple way to improve on those. Yeah, so yeah, just have a look and let me know what you think.
So I just wanted to say that yesterday I was talking to a teammate, to Wang Min, and to try and get him up to speed on how things work. And I could point him to the merge request because the thing wasn't merged yet, and he said it was really helpful. So just as feedback.
That's really good to hear. That's awesome. Thank you.
So I think it's working already. And yeah, about the second point, I'm sort of getting ahead to the third point that Liam added, that the scalability frameworks team is going to get more involved and do more stuff. I agree with you that we should also look at those instructions for adding a new object storage thing, because I took a brief look and they still mentioned still talk about the workhorse issue tracker in the old project, which we got rid of over about a year ago. So they're not up to date. But yeah, I proposed that scalability frameworks, well, probably me. I read the merge request and I look for someone in the work, or I ask feedback from the working group to review if it looks better. Because we have I'm really just getting ahead of things and I'm speaking for Liam a bit, but we have the capacity to do these sort of things. And it's a good way to get started and for us to get familiar with, the status quo and the things we want to be improving. So unless are you keen on writing that merge request, Matthias?
Sorry, which one?
Oh, the one where we update the guidelines on how to add a new storage.
I would need to know what we want to change first. So if there's, I mean, outside of the obvious things, I mean, sure, if the workhorse issue tracker is not a thing anymore, so I can update the obvious things. Another point, I forgot if you, Jacob, had brought it up before, or if it was Alessio, was the idea that should we just ask everyone to not add new buckets, but just if you need a new upload, just put it in uploads, the uploads bucket. There was something that sounded very pragmatic as a way to kind of contain like that kind of complexity a little bit. Are these kind of things we want to call out here?
I think, go ahead.
From a practicality standpoint, there's also a lot of interest in being able to support single bucket format between customers and other things going on. So we definitely need to get to that point, but we have to make sure it works to that well.
But that's not something like individual contributors working on features have control over, right? That's more like a cross-cutting concern, right? You're referring to the consolidated settings versus
just having one bucket at all.
Literally having.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right. All right.
There's effectively, the problem is we can't currently have one bucket because we have no concept of being able to coexist. The expectation is that every feature owns the entirety of the bucket. Whereas if we could so much as say, you're actually in a subdirectory inside of that bucket, here you go. But the total application doesn't function that way at this point in time.
Yeah. So very good call out. I think that the first thing to do is to not change anything and just make sure there's an up-to-date list of how to do it, because that also helps communicate to, I mean, people inside the working group already kind of know how bad things are, but if we have an up-to-date list that says, this is what you need to do, this will help us to make improvements and to sell the need for improvements. So I think the first thing we need to do is to make sure there's an accurate list for the status quo. And I like the idea of just throwing everything in uploads, but that's, again, that's going a step further, that's changing something. So just, it's not pretty, but this is how it is, and get that straight. So I propose that we do that next. Yeah, making things simpler, I think, is one of the long-term goals that we have with scalability frameworks, but that's going to be a lot more work.
Before we get too far ahead, I want to add a couple of points. It's already 3 now, things that we discussed since the beginning. So first of all, again, thank you, Matthias, because I was reading the document and I think it's really on to the point, because we had this problem in the beginning with things that were orthogonal to the whole problem, and was really hard to understand where we're talking about implementation, configuration, or uploading technologies. And the new one, even as you said, it contains less from what we had before. It just explains you what you need to know. So I really like it. On things being outdated, I think I remember when we started the working group that there is a page somewhere in the documentation which still states that object storage is not available on Community Edition. So we have plenty of things like that. That being said, the final part where we were discussing about the single bucket, I do agree. Having a list where it explains what it takes today, it's easier to sell improvement, because you just say, now we are removing this step and this step and this step. But I want to point out that the upload buckets already has a subfolder structure where it is basically storing things that are not real uploads. So a couple of examples, because they came out from the investigation we did in the beginning. Merge request diff are not uploads, but they are into the uploads bucket. And there are other things
but
like
isn't
this.
there a dedicated bucket for merge request diffs?
No, it's part of the upload.
It's a subclass. It reuses the uploader.
Not sure, but it's there. Let me find you.
I have a strong suspicion there's a merge request external diff section in GitLab RB. Jason is nodding.
Yes, there is a separate bucket. However, depending on the implementation of the bits, you may end up in a situation where some things can coexist. There are a few components of the application that you can actually coexist because they behave in the fashion where they can be a subdirectory, or they assume they are a subdirectory of wherever you told them. MR diffs may actually be one of those cases. There is, however, the expectation that it is a dedicated bucket, because that's how we do it for the reference architectures and for cloud native.
Oh yeah, you're right. I was checking. Yeah, I was remembering the wrong thing. They are on a different bucket.
Don't worry about it. A particular case is, like artifacts. Particularly, the artifacts bucket is actually where the build logs go. But because a build log is actually a component piece, you have to compile it in chunks. So it's actually uploaded into temp, build, job ID, and then 0.log, 1.log, etc. And then they're compiled together at the end of the job once everything is finished. So
effectively, the artifacts bucket is the CI/CD bucket.
Really, yes.
It's a team bucket or a stage group bucket. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? It's one of my naive questions. So there are features that would not work if we retroactively would say, oh, it now needs to be in the upload bucket and under some subdirectory. But for new features, why, if I add a new upload, why would I not be able to add it to an existing bucket instead of, like, what is the necessity of adding a new bucket?
No, you can do it for new features.
Well, that's what I meant, right? Kind of like to
yeah, but the
rein
problem,
in new complexity.
yeah, but the other problem is that that Jason was pointing out is if you want to install GitLab, the application demands 10 different buckets because it is not namespacing things, and it just says this thing has to be a bucket and I'm going to start dumping files at the top level.
Right. That would not solve that problem, but it would solve the problem of instead of having to maintain 11, we would kind of cap up. We would like stop that number from. Maybe that's not worth it. I don't know. It was just I thought it was a very.
I think it's a very nice and pragmatic idea, but I still think we should first document the process for adding a new bucket because people are in the middle of adding a new bucket with CI secure files. I don't know how they figured out how they are figuring out how to do it, but it's being built. And it would be much easier to introduce this change once we have a clear list of steps that is up to date that people can follow, because then we can remove some items and say, define a subdirectory here on the uploads uploader and move ahead from there. It's very tempting to go around and want to fix everything, but for some things, I think we just need to make the status quo clear first.
So do we have, or can we come up with a list somewhere in an issue or a Google Doc of what exactly is wrong, outdated, or just incomplete about the current instructions? I wouldn't know what to fix right now outside of the really obvious things like broken links and stuff.
Well, I would do it the other way around, or at least that's the intention of the issue I created. I can think of a single use case, which is I'm a developer and I want to add a new feature and I have to use my own buckets because I'm not on the CI/CD team where we already have our own buckets. No, I'm just making a joke. But I'm a developer, I need to create a new bucket. How do I do that? There needs to be a document that particular use case needs to have a very clear list. These are the steps, and that list needs to be discoverable. And I want to fix just that.
You should also take into account how these things ends up working on GitLab.com, because adding new buckets means that then you expect to roll out this feature. And
yeah,
so
that's part of it. And I'm going to,
I'm
going to ask Jason what the process is for. When the time comes, I'm going to ask what is the process for adding all this config in Omnibus and CNG. Do we have checklists there for how to do that? It's not just how do I do it in GTK.
No, my point is that there is an extra step after that. Once Jason tell you how to do it, is that then those configuration need to be applied in Kate's workload, for instance, so that GitLab.com can make use of those new features, as well as if someone wants to test this on staging graphs, we have plenty of environments now. So these are definitely these are missing step right now. We don't have them.
Exactly. This is part of the goal. Like, because I'm writing it for a developer who is working for GitLab Inc. So they want to see their feature deployed on GitLab.com. Yeah. And it's also, the scalability framework has the perspective of wanting to make the infrastructure side of things smoother. So we also want to make very clear what the friction is now, I think.
Because what's not tossed in there is all of the infrastructure requirement patterns on the bucket itself, right? For self-managed instances, for smaller instances in certain projects, that it's okay. It's not that bad. You just make a bucket, you make sure the permissions are good. But at GitLab.com scale, now we have to include it in GCP. We have to have a GCS bucket. We need to have the appropriate permissions. We need to set up the CDN. We need to it gets like the infrastructure task to actually operationalize the feature goes through the roof every time you add a bucket, because now we have to repeat this process and understand it. And is the bucket content encrypted and
Thank you. I understand. No, that was helpful.
Yeah, we just need to, and I'm not sure into how much detail we'll end up going, but there needs to be some sort of high-level breakdown of these are all the things you need to do and that you need to think about. And I think yeah, I mean, your point of just using the uploads stuff, the uploads bucket for new features it's a very good pragmatic idea, because anybody who's using object storage probably already has the uploads in a bucket.
And it's already like cross-cutting, right? It's not really owned.
Yeah,
I mean, no one really owns uploads because it's a mixed bag already of things.
Yeah. David is not, sorry, do we want to talk more about this topic? Okay, David is not here. He does say bring up an interesting point, but I'm not sure if it makes sense for me to react while he's not here. Okay, I'm going to react anyway. David mentions that from the point of view of the package team, he's thinking about having immutable blob names, which I also think is one of the things that is very problematic right now, that if anytime you need to do a rename in a second system, you can get out of sync, and the renames don't even exist in object storage, so you're doing a copy. So it'd be really nice if we could just create blobs once and never rename them. David is talking about this in the context of package, and when I look at it from the context of scalability frameworks, I think I just don't want this. I don't want to just solve this for package. I want to solve this for everything. But I would ask David, and I can't because he's not here right now, is with what timeline he needs this, because I think this is on our list of things we want to build, and I'm looking at Liam. But it's also something that is a big problem that we don't have a very concrete plan for yet. And if package needs it on a shorter term, then maybe they do need to build it themselves. But if they can wait, then I hope that we will come up with something for this.
Yeah, I was reading the David proposal, and I think that basically is trying to select what came out of all the alternative or slight variation of the solution that we proposed with something that is a real pain point for his team. So was trying to say very politely, if we are not going somewhere as a company, we as a team package should definitely fix this. So this is the subset of the problem space that we need to fix for us. So again,
and that's reasonable, and they've already done that, because I believe they fixed deletions.
Yeah, they made the depending deletion things.
Yeah, they made async delete, but only for package, and we need it for everything.
That's the problem of this working group, right?
Yeah.
So everyone is just reinventing his own wheel.
Yeah. I think it depends a bit. If package implements something on top of the current system, and we manage to make the current system sane, then we just do the same thing twice. So it probably won't break, but it is a wasted effort. But on the other hand, if they need something with a certain timeline, then I don't know. At this point, I don't know when we can solve the general problem, when we can have that solved. So that's a decision I can't make. Or, well, it's not my decision to make, but it's also something I cannot make a recommendation on.
Yeah, I think we can move to the next point, which is still in line with what we were discussing. And I mean, both you and Liam are here, so we can definitely discuss this without putting words in David's mouth. So,
yeah. Do you want to say something, Liam?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this. I think I put it as a shared item because I knew, Jakob, there'd be a lot of overlap with some of the things that you were talking about that you've been spending your time looking at. I think when I was on this call probably a month ago now, I mentioned that we were hoping for Scalability Frameworks team to be able to spend some more dedicated time on implementing some of that output of this working group and some kind of additional improvements to object storage as well. We've been given the green light to go ahead and do that. One of the, and again, I know Jakob mentioned this earlier in the call, one of the things we want to try and achieve in the Scalability Frameworks team is to create kind of like the one way of doing it. And I think that's something we've also mentioned a few times on this call around the multiple ways of doing it, as we just did in the previous point, that do we solve something just for one use case, or should we try and solve it for all of those use cases? And when there's not necessarily been an owner, I think that's what's led to sort of the fragmentation that we've seen, not just in object storage, but in other services and components in GitLab as well. So we're effectively going to take a bit more kind of ownership of this, using the ownership model I've linked through in the agenda. We have an ownership model outlined in the handbook, and the rough thinking of ours at the moment is that object storage would stay decentralized, but the scalability frameworks team would be kind of like the speciality team, as I think we call it in the handbook, who kind of like takes care of the core and takes all of these requirements and ultimately tries to deliver that core framework to support the one way of doing it. So I think all of the output of this working group will form the input of some of the things that we're doing. As Jakob just said, there's so much to do. I think sometimes it feels hard to know where to start, what the right thing to do is. There's so many different requirements. I'm sure there's going to be more requirements once we start coming from others. So we want to try and action some of those things. And one of the nice things also about this working group is it's helped us like identify who will be the key stakeholders and people to consult going forwards. Obviously, the people on this call and in the wider group are the people who, I guess, are most connected and care most about the future of object storage and getting it right. So there'll be close collaboration going forward between scalability and the people in this working group and kind of other teams who have involvement with object storage as well. Jakob, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, like specifically around the way that you've been thinking about solving these problems. Like I know this morning, for example, you started to put together a project list, which is, I guess, in a way, a bit of a brain dump at the moment, and we need to kind of organize that.
Yeah, so yeah, I just tried to organize what the problems are that we want to solve, from the perspective of scalability frameworks. Yeah, I should just pull up that list for a moment because that's easier to talk about. Yeah, so far there are 5 high-level problems. I'm not saying this is exhaustive, but this is a start. The deleting objects during callbacks, which leads to Postgres saturation, as we know, so that is problematic. And the high-level solution to that is asynchronous objects deletion. Doesn't say how we're going to achieve that, but that's probably where we want to take that. This has to do with the immutable keys. So because they're not immutable, we have to do these copies, and we get that mess. Then there's the security problem of unauthenticated uploads, where on the catch-all route, this is the thing Matthias discovered, that we have the skip Rails pre-authorizer that is on all requests, and then we go through all the upload logic in Workhorse without ever pre-authenticating on a lot of requests. And anytime there is there have been multiple security incidents in the past around processing uploads, because you're processing image files, and those things are just prone to security incidents. That's just the way that is. And right now, when there is such a vulnerability, it is an unauthenticated vulnerability. So if we can just get to the point where all these things make an API call, the unauthenticated angle goes away. And that is something we can solve in the current system without fixing any of the other problems. It's sort of orthogonal to the rest. So that's something we want to do short term. And yeah, there's also sort of legacy code problems, and I consider background upload one of them. We have an issue for that now, but Wang Min is going to turn that into an epic, because to properly remove background uploads, we probably have to do multiple stages. And I added an item for the documentation refresh. And we may end up single buckets to this table, to this list, but yeah, this is our starting point, and these are some concrete issues that we have now. Questions? I can say a little bit more about how we want to break down the background upload work. But if there's a question about this high level thing.
I have one question, which is probably is spread across several of those items. So, but I want to just make sure if it's in your idea, and by your I mean you're as the team own that will work on this, which is carrier wave removal.
Yeah, we're thinking about that. I talked about it with Wangmin, and we're trying to figure out. One of the problems with this is that it's such a bowl of spaghetti, and it's not clear which spaghetti is safe to pull on. And yeah, one thing Wangmin and I are going to think about now is whether we can add a new storage to carrier wave that abstracts away the difference between file storage and fork storage, to pull more ownership of this code into GitLab, and then maybe at one point you can get rid of carrier wave. I think tossing out carrier wave altogether is more risky, but carrier wave is definitely a big part of the problem, and we need to have a plan for dealing with carrier wave. But right now it's still, I need to look at the bowl of spaghetti from different angles and see how to approach it. And yeah, we'll probably ask for feedback when we come up with ideas, because some of the people in this call have thought about this for longer. So I think yes, it's important, but I think it follows from the other things. It's a necessary step to achieve these other goals. For instance, legacy code complexity, you can consider it part of that.
Yeah, definitely.
You can consider it part of this. And I'd rather talk about these type of problems than we're being very specific about once the gem is gone, we're going to be better off. But it's probably going to, I don't know what's going to happen with carrier wave, but we definitely need to do something with it.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. I just want to make sure if it was still on the agenda, I mean, or in the radar, or if we.
Yeah, it's on the radar, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't know exactly. I don't know exactly what to do about it, so I don't want to create expectations. We're going to do X about carrier wave, because
this breakdown makes a lot of sense. I mean,
I think there's a piece of work for us to do, and I think this will probably inspire that piece of work in frameworks around defining what we mean by core framework for object storage. And I think that will probably have some functional requirements, some non-functional requirements. One of the points we add here is adding new object storage features is complicated. One of the ways to solve that is by improving the documentation. But I'm sure there's also technical things that we can do to make plugging in easier. And I think when we define kind of what we mean by core framework, that'll be one of the things we can cover. And we'll talk about kind of like how it's formed, right? And is carrier wave part of that as a dependency? So yeah, hopefully that's something that will come in time.
Okay, as Jason pointed out, I didn't notice that we are not at time, but bus time. So
sorry about that.
No, I mean, we're enjoying the school. All of us are. So just want to say, to wrap this up, we should definitely try to frame this together with how can we declare that we are done with the working group. So maybe we should try to find some time, maybe Jakob, me and Liam, or to just try to came to a conclusion and say the working group is done here, and now the frameworks team is picking up and continuing. So let's think about this. Let's think what we need for dealing with the ongoing stuff. And yeah, Matthias, we can keep your thing async, but thanks for pointing out point number 4, because I think it's important, because with the removal of stuff. So, okay. Thank you everyone for your time, and see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.